Welcome to the Mum CEO podcast. I'm your host, Esther Roach. Join me as we explore the dynamic intersection of motherhood and entrepreneurship. From the challenges to the triumphs, we're here to unravel it all. Get ready for insightful conversations, practical wisdom, and a whole lot of inspiration. Let's embark on this empowering journey together. Hello and welcome to the Mum CEO podcast. I'm your host, Esther Roach, and today I'm joined by Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Esther. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. If you'd like to, please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so I'm Jenny Feneley. I live near Bedford in the UK. I run a business which helps organisations implement information security management systems. I've been doing that for about a year. Before that, I spent 25 years in DHL, so a big corporation in various iterations and buyouts and mergers and things like that. Then I spent a brief time managing operations in a IT managed service provider, which I really enjoyed doing. And actually, I really enjoyed the sort of information security side of things. So I fell out with the CEO there because we had very different opinions and he didn't like people arguing with him. You've probably come across that before yourself, Esther. People who think they're all right about everything. So then I decided I would go out on my own because I'm 52 and I've wanted to do it for a long time. But obviously I've got children and now, and a mortgage and things like that. But this moment I really felt the job market wasn't very good. I needed to start something quite quick. So, I did that and it's been interesting. I've got two children. So my son's 18. He's an apprentice engineer, which he loves. And my daughter is 15 and she's obviously still at school studying for her GCSEs. She loves sociology and health and social care and that side of things, so we have some great conversations and we'll be walking the dog and she'll go, Mummy, from the functionalist perspective, and then I'll be like, okay. so that's lovely. And she wants to go to uni, and I've got two dogs, as I've just said to you, Esther, before the podcast started. One of them's poorly, and he's outside looking very sorry for himself, but in the sunshine. So there we are. So that's a whistle-stop tour of my life.
Well, thank you so much. And there is a lot, and I have tons of questions, but I'm gonna have to keep it short. So firstly, you mentioned you're 52.
Yes.
You don't look it, but how did you even, what was the mindset shift for you to you spent so long in DHL to sort of get into information security by yourself at the age, well, you would have been 51, isn't it? It's last year you started. Yeah. So
yeah.
There's no time frame as to when you can start a business, but what gave you that nudge, that push to do it?
Honestly, I didn't want to retire and struggle for money. So I had this idea that, I've got a decent pension and things like that, but my mortgage didn't finish till I'm like 62. As you know, things are getting more and more expensive. It's really difficult. I want to do things in my retirement, so I want to be able to afford to go on a cruise or go and do these things and look after my kids and things like that, and it's very difficult on a normal pension to do that. So I'm not saying I'm necessarily going to make millions, but there would be no opportunity to make any more money. I would be relying on my pension. So that was one idea. The other one is I really love work. And I don't want to work a full-time job and then retire and do nothing. I wanted a career, an opportunity to kind of do work when I want to do the work. So the kind of work I do, I can take on a project which might only be a day, even a month if, you get very limited support. So I could just do one of those just to keep myself ticking over, or, I could take on a bigger project. So I just wanted to have some flexibility as I got older and I wanted to wind down a little bit. So they were the kind of motivations. Plus, I suppose I really had it with being told what to do, not being able to drive direction. I think I'm quite creative in terms of what I want to do. I've got a lot of passion about how I think organizations should be run. And from what I've seen, particularly in the smaller organization I worked in, and many people that I've spoken to share this, people don't manage their businesses properly. They do sales, but they don't think about, can we actually resource the service that we've provided? Oh, we don't manage risks. We don't take risks, but then we don't manage the inherent risks of business. We throw things at our operations without understanding the people within the operation, what they can do, how passionate these people are. I've seen them being treated really badly, taken for granted, all these kind of things. And I want to prove that all the theories, I'm just a continuous, probably like you, Esther, just always want to learn. I'm always reading new books about risk and about operations and about how to manage people and get the best out of people. And I really wanted an opportunity to try and put all that into practice as well. So, yeah, so lots of reasons, really.
There's plenty of reasons, but, and a lot of important reasons as well, because, like yourself, I don't, this is a conversation. I remember my eldest, who is a boy. So I've got one boy and 4 girls. And
I remember you saying you had many children.
Yes, I have many. So I thought, Mum, when you retire, I'm like, what's that? Because I don't see myself as somebody who's going to be able to just sit down and, I don't know. I think I'll be really, really bored with my life if I just sat and didn't have to think about anything and be creative. But you've also touched on something that's quite relevant in terms of, it doesn't just affect the industry that you're in. It's almost across the board in loads of industry where employees are not, their creativity is pretty much limited because obviously the culture of the company is slightly different. I know there's quite a few companies out there that are trying to make that change and allowing their staff to kind of grow and be creative and be themselves when they come to work. But what do you think is the best way forward? If somebody from an organization is listening, this is not you talking to another business person because they're managing it themselves, but this is you sort of saying to companies and bosses, you could do better in this area.
I think exactly what you just said, really. So I think we need to go from this idea that for employees to perform, that they need, strict guidelines and checklists and, and that kind of thing, and understand that if you treat people well, they will do a good job. And, if things go, for example, if things go wrong, we have this habit of trying to identify who did the wrong thing and stop them doing it again going forward. Even if it's not a blame culture, it's very, very much like, oh, Barry did, that wrong thing. Obviously, we need to train him more on that. But that's, if only life was like that. If only, like, you could say, right, if we just train Barry, nothing will go wrong again. Well, we know life has a million different factors. Somebody's tired one day, an email doesn't come in, there's traffic, it's all we're a system, a complex system, and an organization can't ring fence itself. So we need to start thinking more about creating the environment and conditions for people to thrive and to do a good job. And that's where I think that we'll get more resilience. So I suppose what I'd say to companies is train your people, get a diverse workforce. So diverse as in, obviously, different colours, different genders, but also from different backgrounds. So some people are from corporations, some people have got technical skills, some people that are more strategic, some people that have come from small businesses, mums going back into the workforce. The more diversity of skills and experience that you've got, the more you train people and create those environments where people feel respected, the more resilient organizations will naturally become, because you can't prevent things from going wrong. You can't prevent pandemics and earthquakes and climate change, if only we could, and things like that. What we need is to really harness the skills and the resilience of human beings to give them the tools. And I think that's how we'll not only get more engaged workforces, but how organizations will thrive and grow in a very complex and sometimes quite dangerous life that we're living in at the moment.
Yeah, no, there is so much, and to be honest, it's really interesting what you're mentioning about the whole diverseness. I've just literally had another session, and the lady I spoke to mentioned about how difficult she found it to even get back into work because she had children, and it's like, there isn't that kind of support, that flexibility in terms of just having that diverse network, because potentially you're gonna do away with some really amazing talent, somebody who can actually help propel your business simply because, one, they're a mom, or they're a different culture or a different color or whatever it is. But it's almost like you just want to bring the skill together, to help the business move forward. But I think flexibility is quite, it's still lacking a lot. I see that a lot.
No, and I think it really is.
Yeah.
And being a mum of 5 and I'm a mum of 2, there's a certain skill set that comes with that. Yes, there are going to be times when they need to go to a school play or they need to leave early, but there will be the gratitude of, I'm not going to let you down because you're letting me be flexible. So you're going to have a reliable team member, somebody who's going to go the extra mile because you do. But also we've got a certain skill set, haven't we? We've got a certain skill set of dealing with difficult people, because they are toddlers and teenagers, and that is that's a skill set that we need. That's what I mean, and exactly what you said. That's diversity of skills. If we're all red kind of men, in the sense of where you and assess somebody's personality, then they're not necessarily going to be the people who can deal with the difficult client or negotiate a good deal from a vendor, or because they won't have the patience, or that kind of thing. They're not going to be the best at getting money out of clients that don't want to pay by being more persuasive, or and all these kind of these skills are so still, as you say, so undervalued, I think. And I've worked, a while ago, but I don't think Simon's very good for our team. He's not dynamic. He won't go, in front of a big crowd and just start talking. And I'm like, no, but he's the one who will test the system every which way and document it all down and do all the instructions. And whereas you and I, the boss, we wouldn't do that. We'd be like, oh yeah, it's fine, let's move on to the next exciting thing. You need that different
So it's recognizing basically the strengths, within a team. Whatever you do, it's recognizing the strengths of others and sort of counteracting it with somebody else's weaknesses, if you like, in terms of, if they're not so good in that, don't keep pushing them in that, and try and make it work. And
exactly.
be accommodating, I suppose, of the differences that we all have. No, that's really good. I just wanted to touch on, somebody else who's listening might be thinking, what is the whole information security all about? So what do you do?
Okay.
Who do you work with in the whole information security area?
Okay, so a big component is cybersecurity. So I'm sure by now we've all heard of the Marks and Spencer's debacle, where they had the ransomware and then everything closed down, and they said they weren't going to start being able to do online shopping again until July or something like that. So there's that aspect to it. So that's kind of identifying where information systems might be vulnerable to these bad actors, and they could be people who attack the system for ransom. So basically what they do is they somehow get in, and it might be like a phishing email. In that case, it was somebody who tricked a help desk into giving them access to the system. And then they basically go into the system and they freeze it all. And they say, until you pay us $1 million, we're not going to release your systems. So there's that side of things. And then if that does so, what do we need to do to protect our systems from those kind of attacks? So you will all know about antivirus protection and don't click on the phishing link and things like that. So that's one aspect. And there's obviously, for the big systems, there's lots that go into that about keeping systems up to date and all that kind of thing. But then there's also a really big component, which is why I'm passionate about resiliency and about engaging different minds and making sure people are well trained and responsive, is because as much as you know, as much as we can reduce risk, we can never eliminate it. So you can have the best antivirus software, the best phishing campaigns, the best training and awareness. Somebody is going to get tricked. Somebody's going to forget to patch a system up. Some hacker is going to find a new loophole where they can get into your systems. So what's just as important is how we respond to that. So what do we do? Let's plan. If we do get one of these ransomware events, what do we do? And you nail that down exactly. Right. First thing we do is we close all the systems off to the network. The second thing we do is to get our major incident response team in to the point where we communicate them firstly with WhatsApp, and then we set up a group on Teams. All this exactly, piece by piece, what you do to respond. We know who our experts are that we're going to get in immediately as soon as this happens. We know the regulatory requirements that we need to notify these authorities when it happens. So, how you respond to it is just as important. So I help organizations identify those areas of what could happen and how do we respond to it, and then practice it. So in theory, it's great, but does your boss actually get WhatsApp messages at 3 a.m? So let's test it through, all that kind of thing. But then there's that cyber sort of piece. But then there's also things like, your SharePoint site. So if you put all your documents on Google Docs or on SharePoint, can everybody access it? Have you got good controls around your documents? So you're using the latest one, and that there aren't 5 different versions around. So there's all this thing about, and even people. So yourself that, in an organization, there might be that one person who can sign off payroll. And if they're not there, nobody gets paid, right? So what do you do if they are, break their leg or something? So it's identifying those weaknesses, all those sort of information processes, and then either having backup plans or, that kind of thing. So it's everything to do with information flows, which in the world of today, that can touch on just about any business operation effectively. So that's it, really.
You don't have that action plan because you don't know what you're going to do. And I'm assuming are you working with mainly larger organizations, or do you work with just, SMEs and that sort of stuff?
So I've worked with very small organizations, but the one I'm working on at the minute is an engineering firm with 400 people and 13 sites across the UK. So that's quite a big one. Another one I've got coming up, no giant ones. Another one's sort of a global organization, but they only have 55 people. So all different scales and different types of businesses.
Oh, fantastic. But I suppose, it doesn't really matter what the size of the business is, because all those things, we all use technology. We all need the whole cyber security side, and then the information flows, but it's everything, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it really is. And it's quite enlightening, really. So, when I started with this engineering firm, which I just started this week, when you start going down, right, so they have to do a feasibility report for a potential client. Are we going to be able to put a building here of the type we want? And then you start saying to them, right, what do they need access to be able to do that? And they start thinking, oh, well, actually, they need access to these books that have got standards in, and they need to access vendor portals, and they need to access the SharePoint, and they need, and then they start really thinking like, and then they're like, actually, there's only one guy, Kevin, who could do that. So, and you start to really think of all the impacts of, and then you can say, well, that's really negligible risk. We don't have to do anything about those. And then the whole kind of process, it comes off the risk assessment. So then you say, what's the risk of, losing this book? Well, I'm not going to do a whole risk management process around this book on John's desk, for example. However, if we've got one guy that can do the feasibility report, what happens if they're off? So you do it from a risk basis as well, so that everybody's got limited resources, so that you really put the resources around your vulnerabilities, your high impact or your highly likely things, rather than trying to spread yourself so thin over everything. So it's a really good way of kind of using your resources efficiently as well, and protecting the right things.
Oh, fantastic. I think there's a lot of information around that, but there's also equally a lot of things that people kind of miss in having that guidance. And it's important to just have somebody who can kind of say, okay, this is the right direction, or try and cover this ground, because that will put you in better stead for when something actually happens and stuff, which is incredible. I've noticed as well, obviously, looking at the ages of your kids, they're still fairly young. So you've got that teen stage at the minute. How has that influenced you with obviously running your business?
So for a start, it's been positive. So my kids have been so supportive. I think they've maybe had one wobble the whole time where they've been like, are you sure you shouldn't get a job? My son said the other day, maybe if you cleaned your car out, you could drive an Uber. But
lovely.
but they've been overwhelmingly positive. They're very independent, which is great. So my daughter, although we're very close, it's fine for them to come in and they help me. So I don't know, I mean, they're not interested. So I've gone, oh, well, if the business gets big, you could join. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't want to do that. And that's fine, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything. It's just positive. My son's great. He's really interested in business. Like I said, my daughter's more into like psychology, sociology, the people side of things. But my son's really remarkably kind of a good sounding board. Like sometimes I drive into work and we have like good chats, and he'll go, well, why don't you do this? Or no, you can't do that, Mum, because of this. And I'll be like, oh yeah. So yeah, so they're just really positive, really.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And you also mentioned something about failure is not an option. What does that mean to you personally?
Well, for me, very practical, right? Because I didn't start with a big cushion of money or anything like that. I've never been very good at saving. So I was literally what it says. I can't fail. I need to make money out of this. Otherwise, I won't be able to pay my mortgage and look after my kids, basically. But it's also meant that I do struggle to focus, and I'm one of those typical self-diagnosed ADHD people, right? And I think we're all a bit like that to an extent, that we're all driven and motivated by different things, and I need deadlines, and I need but that failure is not an option. Needing to make money just keeps me going all the time, relentlessly. So I work full time all the time, even when I'm not making money, marketing, designing new ways of doing things, writing articles. And I think that's been really good, because if I had 50 grand in the bank or something like that, it would be quite easy to go, oh, I'll do it later. I've got a bit of money. I've got a bit of a cushion behind me. So it's actually been quite good that I've had this failure is not an option mindset to keep me going.
The thing is, though, I don't think, if you have that amount in there, you would stop. A lot of people that you're constantly thinking, and what's the next thing? The business needs this, and it's a constant. You can't really just lay back in the sunshine and forget all about it.
No. Even when I try, I'm sure you're the same, Esther. Even when I try, I'll be like, right, I'm just going to enjoy, like, the sun's out now. I can see it on my sun lounger. But as soon as I try, I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be a great idea? And then I'm putting it on the project plan, right? I'll do it later. And then, just like you say, you're constantly like,
It doesn't work. I'm equally as bad because even the kids are like, have you got ants in your pants? You can't sit down, mom, for 5 minutes and relax. It's like, yeah, now the sun is out. I better do the laundry. I'll hang it out. And then you're trying to do everything in between all the stuff. So it's hopeless.
It is hopeless, but it's nice. I love, like, I'm less physically, I can just sit around for a bit. You should see my house. Don't look at my house. It's just very messy. But my brain is always going. But I love it. I love, like, being creative and having ideas and, that. But sometimes I'm sure you're the same, that I'm like, I just want to turn it off just for a minute. Just turn the brain off just for Sometimes it's like fizzing, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, I think if you're thinking of something, it's difficult to just switch off because you kind of feel, oh, I've got to do this and finish. But I'm okay. Once I've done it, put it, or even just write it down. I know it's done. It's out of
yeah.
my head, and then I don't have to think about it, and I can just kind of get back to it when I need to. But it's so hard. It can be really difficult if your mind works like that, which is mad. One of the things I wanted to ask, because, at the start we mentioned one, starting a business at 51 years young, and and a whole completely, well, a big change, from having been with like DHL for so long. What advice would you have to somebody else who is thinking, well, I'm too old to start a business at this stage? What would you say to them?
I would say to them, imagine you're 55 and you're still in the job you don't like. You'd be thinking, why didn't I just start 4 years ago? Because now it's too late. Or you're 55 and then you get to 60. Why didn't I start 5 years ago? And you've still got so much life. I think every day I'm just starting. I just have that mindset, because why set yourself a limit? To me, you start aging. The minute you think I'm going to have to slow down because I'm aging now, that's when slow slide into death, basically, as far as I'm concerned. And just do it. Why not? If you've got the energy to do it, if you've got the enthusiasm, the passion, why wouldn't you do it? And you can have this mindset that entrepreneurship is for young people, or I'm not a tech bro, or this kind of thing. But you'd be amazed if you go, well, you go into the networking group, it's all ages, and there's actually quite a lot of people that are my age that I think are very same mindset. I'm fed up. I'm too old now to be in an organization where I'm being told what to do. I don't want to be told what to do. I'm a mature adult. I want to do my own, I want my own destiny. And, and also I think a lot of people do think about, they want more out of their retirement. They're not satisfied now. We have more expectation that I think that we want to do things in our retirement and make the most out of our lives. We're not, even 30 or 40 years ago, you'd be like, well, I'll retire and then that's basically, my last bit, and then I'll just spend time with grandkids and then, off I go. We want to keep living, don't we? And so I think people do want to try and build some financial freedom. So I think there's a lot of people. So, if one of the things that puts people off, which I did think about at first, is, am I just going to look old compared to everyone else? No. I mean, there's all ages and older that go into this. So I would probably say, if you could have a financial cushion, might make things slightly less stressful. No, go for it. Would you add anything else? Because I know you're younger than me, but what questions would you ask if you were starting later? What would you ask me about? What would your concerns be?
I don't know. Do you know, one of the things that I tend to think of, I'm not really sure whether it comes back to like even the kids, because somebody else will be saying, oh my gosh, I have such a mountain of things to do and I have one child. And then somebody else will look at me and say, you've got five. But at the same time, it's almost similar to the age. And like you said, for me, it's more the energy. But what I would be saying, it's probably maybe the research. And nowadays, I think the mentoring, because before I don't think it was a big thing that you had mentorship or you could look, but we've got so much resources. My question would probably be, why didn't you start earlier? You know, like a bit like, why didn't you start earlier? Why now?
Yeah.
And that's sort of
Yeah, well, and that I think that was the kids, and also I think I don't know whether you've experienced it, but you can get a little bit institutionalized. So because I'm very, and one thing we didn't talk about when we talked about diversity was neurodiversity.
Oh, yeah.
Now, whether or not I have any kind of actual pathology or anything to diagnose, I definitely interact with people differently to the cookie cutter corporate expectation that you don't have emotions and you don't argue with people and you don't get passionate about things, and you have to be, if you start getting like that, people will go, what's wrong with you? And it's not because you're angry, it's because you're really that kind of thing just doesn't fit in the corporate mold very often. So I didn't thrive. It sounds weird being there for so long, but I think it was kind of a vicious circle. I didn't thrive in that environment. So then I lost confidence and I started to think I'm not degree or anything either. So then I start to think, well, I'm very niche and no one else is going to want me. And then so you kind of, and it was very easy. I worked from home for 10 years. So with the kids, even before the pandemic and everything. So it wasn't a very challenging job. So when the kids, life just goes by, doesn't it? And then, suddenly it's 10 years later and you look up and you were the young, dynamic. And then suddenly you're like the older, late 40s person going, where's my life gone? And then so that's just kind of how it was. And then I got reached out by this guy on LinkedIn just out of the blue. Really, I did put open to work because I said to my boss at DHL, I'm really reaching the end of this. I can't do this anymore. It's making me so unhappy. So I put open to work, and then literally within about 3 weeks, this guy, the CEO, just approached me and said, we've got this job. Do you want to interview for it? It was like a miracle. And so I did that, and then I did thrive, because then I had my own department. They had so much that they needed doing, so much change that needed to happen, and and then I was like, I do know what I'm doing, and I am good at this, and and then and that really boosted my confidence. It made me realize I really was passionate and good at operations and doing these things and motivating teams and that kind of thing. And then when we ended up clashing about resources and all kinds of things, that's when I was like, no, I can do this and I'm going to do it. And it might be later than a lot of people do it, but so what?
So Jenny, we've touched on so much, loads of information. I just wanted to find out from you, what have your children taught you with regards to, things like leadership and just resilience? What have you learned from them?
So I think actually my son particularly has demonstrated, and he's actually showed me how to be resilient. He struggles a lot. We're belatedly getting him diagnosed for ADHD. He's had a lot of challenges with his dad because his dad doesn't understand what it's like to struggle with these difficulties in executing tasks and staying on task and organizing, and remembering appointments and things like that. His dad's not very good at that. So, but my son demonstrates all the time how he just deals with it and overcomes it and just keeps going, even when it's really, really difficult. He used to struggle with his emotions, and he's really got that under control. And he's actually modeled that for me, and I've actually become more level. It's really odd. It's like, well, if he can do it as a teenager with all these problems, then I need to get a hold of myself and become better at dealing with things. I think in general, I found having smaller children difficult. I don't know, you seem like you just must dream over it, but I find it really difficult because you can't have a conversation with them, can you? You can't explain that, just because that bean is slightly bigger than that bean doesn't mean that that bean tastes any different. So please don't get upset about it. So I suppose just being able to deal with very difficult situations and difficult people to different approaches and things like that, and I've benefited from having this, like I said, in the main bit of the interview, just having them as my biggest supporters and things has been really good. I don't know, they're just great people.
It's all positive though, because I think sometimes it can be really hard. And like you say, up of five, you've got two, but the same principles are there because they're not the same child. Every one of them is individual. They have their own needs. And I think that applies to just generally society. It applies to work because we are all very different human beings, and we're complicated beings. And we're all very different, and it's one of those things that's important. I think you pick up that skill and that value when you're a parent, because you realize that your own children are not the same, and they're not going to be exactly like
they
you.
don't respond to things differently, and different things affect them different ways, so like you say, because they're different, you have one way of dealing with people, but then when you've got one child who you can tease and you can have banter with, and then maybe another one that's very sensitive and they don't respond the same way to those kind of things, and one, in my case, one I'll drift off and I'm not listening, and one's just like, oh God, not hello mom, whereas the other one will be like, oh, I thought you'd be like really interested in what you know what I mean? So you get a microcosm of how people, like you said, react differently, and different things, they care about different things and respond differently, and like you say, it's a really good training ground for society.
No, absolutely. And it's huge, there's a lot to learn. I think you can never nail it, but you can certainly do your best and try and get it right. And what would you say, one bit of advice you would give to somebody else who's thinking of starting a business, who is a mum?
So don't think you can't, for a start, but it has to be something that you are passionate about, because you are going to be pulled in so many different directions. Don't just do it because you think you're going to make money out of it, because A, you won't for a long time, and B, that's not going to be enough of a motivator when you've got your child needing your attention and your work needing your attention. And it's got to be something that you want to do, that it excites you, and it's something when you're tired at the end of the day, like we've said, you do need to rest and you do get tired, but you have ideas because you're passionate about what you do, and you need that. So that would be my main bit of advice: is don't go into it. Obviously, you go into it wanting to make money. We all need to make money, but there has to be something else as well. It has to align with your purpose. You have to be passionate about it on some level, and be interested in it, because you have to keep learning. Things change, even in what you might think a creative industry doesn't change, but maybe you make hats and you think, well, making hats is the same today as it was 300 years ago, but going to market with that hat, styles change, the ways of advertising, technology changes, using AI, all these things that you need to keep up with. So you need to be somebody who wants to learn and to keep up to date, and reading and listening, and all these things. You have to be an active participant in it, if you see what I mean. Passionate and wanting to always learn. I think are the two things. If you haven't got that, you might just be better sticking to a day job, and there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Well, exactly, because business is not for everybody, and there's got to be enough of a drive to what you want to do, and that's absolutely important, because you want to get up and make that difference, isn't it? And see that what you're doing is adding value. And it's important to also see that it's not always overnight success like what we see sometimes. So you have to be in it for the long haul.
Absolutely. No, it's taken me a year to get. It took me a year to get my first. I did some freelancing for another consultancy, but it's taken a year to actually get paid direct client money, basically. So it will not, like you say, we're very lucky if it happens overnight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And where can people find you if they want to work with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. Mainly, that's where I do most of my interactions, and my name's very unusual, Jenny Feneley. So just search me up, and I am the ISO lady. Ooh, the ISO lady. That might be a good headline for my for my LinkedIn
You've just
profile.
said another light bulb.
So ISO 27001, which is the international standard for information security, that's in my headline. So just look for me and ISO 27001, and there I am.
Oh, fantastic.
And I just want to say as well that if there are people listening and they are older and a mum, and they maybe don't have a lot of business experience, or they do and they're just not sure whether to take a leap, I'm always happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can have, I love having one-to-ones with new people. Even if I can't offer any additional knowledge, I'm always happy to meet people, network and chat it over, and whatever people need, or you ladies that are thinking of starting out.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
To do that as well.
No, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much. What I'll do is I will have the links when your episode goes live. There'll be links there where people can connect with you. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And thank you so much for sharing, well, so really openly, honestly, and so much information, to be honest, that I'm sure the audience are going to love it.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, and it has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you as well, Esther. You're a lovely lady, and dealing with 5 kids, I don't know how you do it. Bye, take care. Bye-bye.